And we are live. Greetings, everyone. This is the Skeptic Feminist, and we are joined today by Bane666au. Hi, Bane.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. I've been watching your channel for a little while now,
Yes, and we are joined
as you
today
know.
by
Oh,
Well,
Bane666au.
that's
Hi,
my bad.
it wasn't me this time. So
We will be we'll try to focus the chat on the productive conversation rather than finger pointing, and we really do respect your very lucid speeches on your channel, Bane, even if you tend to title your videos rather provocatively.
oh, you
um,
mean the toxic feminism bit?
yeah, that's how we got introduced to you was when you responded to some of our
Oh,
earlier
there's
work.
a reason I use that title. I kept on coming across the term toxic masculinity,
Yes, I
which
figured it was a play on that. Yeah.
I find it rather offensive, and I kept on being told, well, we're not talking about all masculinity. We're only talking about those aspects of it which are toxic.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, well, I might use the same logic. So I'm not talking about all feminism. I'm only talking about those aspects of it which are toxic. Which,
Very
of course,
good.
a lot of people don't get that, and they see it as offensive because they
Mhm.
assume I'm talking about all feminism, which is my original point.
Indeed.
If you get my meaning. Yeah.
Yes.
So
So,
where should we start?
well, the purpose of this friendly conversation is to see if we can solve all the problems in our two movements right here, right now, by figuring out
In
a
an
middle
hour.
ground, uh, a way to cooperate or at least coexist between
Yep.
feminism and the MRM without pointing fingers, simply moving the conversation of gender issues forward on both fronts, hopefully cooperatively. So we're
Well,
just
I think
gonna
there's a
shoot the
difference
breeze, I guess.
between cooperation and coexisting.
Yes.
And I think we can agree on some issues, but I think we'll always disagree on others.
Yes.
And I think that's fine. I don't think there's a problem with different movements, with different ideas. And I think it's good to criticize each other and to keep each other honest.
Agreed. I
Um,
think that's how movement grows. You know, once it stops being able to accept criticism internally or externally, that's when the movement really starts to stagnate and kind of become worthless and die. So we do
yeah, I
appreciate
tend to agree.
constructive criticism.
So what's the common ground then? What are the issues that we agree on? I think there's a number of them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's. I mean, obviously, we're all atheists, so we all agree that religion is a problem. Um, it reaches beyond just churches and mosques and synagogues, and it extends into the political spectrum to varying degrees depending on which country you happen to live in. Um, and it informs social axiom and the way people are brought up, even if they don't really consider themselves to be terribly religious. Um, and I think that is something that can be harmful to uh, all genders. So,
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think you've probably got it a bit worse in America than I do here.
mm,
We tend to be a bit more secular, but we still see it creeping into schools and things like that. And I've got no problem with people having their own personal belief as far as religion goes. Uh, my problem is when um, the government gets involved and starts bringing it into schools and things like that. That's when I think it's crossing the line. Although there are obviously other issues with certain aspects of religion which doesn't involve the government. Once again, I think that's a much bigger issue in America
mm.
when it comes to Christianity than it is, say, here, though.
I absolutely agreed. And you know, as secularists, we are all for the separation of church and state, which is not to be confused with banning all religion or whatever. There are important allies within like Majid Nawaz in Islam, and plenty of secular Christian thinkers who are really vital to the conversation. It can't just be atheists who are pushing for the separation of church and state. Religion needs to realize, and many religious people do, that the only way to maintain religious pluralism is through a secular system. So that's where we stand in terms of religion and government. And as far as America is concerned, you're probably right. I don't know too much about Australia, I'm afraid, but no doubt.
Just a few years ago, we did have a female atheist prime minister, so I think we're a little bit ahead of the Americans in that sense.
I think you're right. America is behind many, I guess, considered Western countries. But I'm still quite happy to be here, as opposed to in Russia, where
America.
Putin has married the church and the state. So.
No, I agree. I think there's many positive things about America. So I don't mean to come across as condemning all Americans or anything.
Oh no! I didn't take it like that at all. But.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't want to condemn all of Christianity either. I mean, I'm friends with some Christians. They don't force their religion on me or expect me to be a Christian or anything like that. And I think that's once again the coexistence between people who disagree on fundamental things.
Indeed, and that is really, really very important. I guess so let's get into how religion, I guess, since we're on the topic of religion first, how religion affects the gender conversation from the MRM perspective, from the feminist perspective. Would you like to go first?
Well, I think it's hard to criticize, from my side of the fence, it's hard to criticize anything that Islam does without being labeled an Islamophobic by many people on your side of the fence. And I find that very frustrating. Because the same people, if I were to criticize Christianity over something similar, I don't get that same criticism. But if I criticize Islam, I get what is basically a silencing tactic from some people on your side. I suspect that you would agree with me that that's not a good thing.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly frustrating. We constantly encounter. And I don't think it's so much feminism specifically as it is liberalism in general in the West.
Yeah, it's more the social justice types, I think.
Right. And do you classify yourself as a liberal in the classic sense, at least?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, politically, I'm a centralist, so I think the more left or right you go, the crazier you get. So I try to stay in the center as much as possible. But I guess I've always been a little bit left-leaning.
Yeah,
I guess over the last couple of years I've moved even more to the center just because of some of the extreme aspects of the far left, though.
Right.
They seem to be mirroring the far right.
Yes, there was an interesting, and I'm ashamed to say I forget who mentioned this, but I think it was Peter Boghossian on the Rubin Report. He was talking about how the further out on the corners of left or right you go, if you visualize bending that line, they're closer together than the center, if that makes any sense. I thought that was a really good visual.
Horseshoe theory or something like that's called.
I just thought it was a great visual, but it does seem to be the further out on the corners you go, the more authoritarian it becomes, whether theocracy or I don't know, socialism or whatnot. But
yeah, I think what you're describing is horseshoe theory. I think it's called, where.
Okay, that's right. You're right. Yeah, that's exactly what it's called.
And the funny thing is, feminism and the men's rights movement often get put in that same dynamic where the ends of the horseshoe, and
Right.
people suggest that we're the same thing.
Well, and I don't. I think we are. We do have like as our stated goals as movements and as individuals in this chat. I think we have a lot more in common than not, and I
I
think
would tend to agree with that.
yeah, and I take exception to viewing feminism and the MRM as like polar opposites of each other. So, which is why I think it's important to have these kind of conversations. But as far as the criticism of Islam, it does seem to be endemic to Western liberalism, which strikes us as very and we do consider ourselves classic liberals. And what I what I started saying was fundamentalist feminists, being that we believe in those basic fundamentals of gender equality, and everything else is kind of negotiable, you know.
Yeah, that word fundamentalist though brings up some bad connotations, though, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, and which is why I kind of enjoy using it, you know,
Yeah.
because it's it ruffles some feathers. Like we like to say first world problems, and then we go into actual problems worth addressing in the first world, you know. So
Yeah.
it's a nice
Well,
little.
that's an interesting point. What do you consider to be the main feminist problems in the first world? Because some people on my side don't think that feminism has a place in the first world anymore. I would disagree. I think, well, I would say there should be a female rights movement in the West. I'm just wondering what you think some of the main issues are, because we tend to hear a lot of fluff in the media, or a lot of non-issues.
Yes, and those trivialities about I mean we're all gamers, you know, like we like video games. But we don't think that feminism necessarily needs to be focusing on that so much, in terms of like gender inclusion in video games or whatever. I think that really detracts from larger issues, trigger warning, safe spaces, man-spreading. We did videos on all of these, kind of criticizing them, and I think we, as far as first problems in the first world, or first world problems that women face, and I think that feminists tackle and perhaps need to tackle more, are obviously the abortion rights, you know, the bodily autonomy stuff that's constantly being challenged by the theocracy that would be.
Well, I was just about to say, once again, that ties in a great deal with how we started this conversation with America, and religion being a major thing in America.
Right, which is why
we tend to have pro-lifers here, but it's not as big a deal as with you guys.
Yeah, well, you are very lucky, I think. This is it's. I mean, I went from Russia, like I said, to the USA, and it wasn't. It was still very much communist when I left. Now it's Putin has, like I said, really married the church and the state, and so all of those homophobic, anti-woman sentiments are really rampant. But anyway, the back to your question, as far as the issues that again tie back to a lot of the religious sentiment, the bodily autonomy. In Texas alone, there's thousands of decades-old untested rape kits. It's called the problem of the backlog. I think there's a whole website.
I've heard an explanation for that. I don't know how legitimate it is, but from memory, they only test kits if the case is going forward.
Right.
So if the case is dropped, or the woman decides not to press charges, then the rape kit sits there and doesn't get tested.
Which kind of calls into question the legal system's handling of a rape case. You know, like there's 31 states in the United States where rapists have legal custody to children that they force on their victims.
Yeah, and I agree that's
So
wrong.
that would be another issue. And there's a 21,000, I think, reported sexual assault cases in the United States military that happened in 2013. In the United States military in that 1 year alone, and that is just ridiculous.
Just recently, when I was doing research for a video, I came across the statistics for female suicide in the military, and it staggered me because outside of the military, male suicide is at a much higher rate than female suicide, but those figures are basically reversed in the military. There's still more male suicides, but obviously there's a larger number of males in the military. So I thought that was an interesting statistic.
Well, it's a disturbing statistic, to say the least. But
no doubt. I wonder what the cause of it is.
Right, and I mean, I was in the United States military. The gender, it's an old boys club, and whether you're I mean, obviously it's worse if you're a woman, much worse. But whether you're a woman or a male who doesn't hold those old school prejudices that, like, yeah, let's go get drunk and beat the shit out of gays or something. And I'm not saying all military men are like this, of course, but there was I don't necessarily want to make this a rant about the U.S. military, but
no, that's cool.
To focus on your question, there is a lot of issues that I think get sidelined when fellow feminists or fellow liberals focus on trivialities, or, as in the case with Islamic violence, say toward honor killings in the West, which disproportionately affect, say, women of Pakistani descent, don't get heard. And so there is it is a massive problem that we recognize within our fellow liberal circles, that it almost seems to be about racism in a way, because, like, what's more racist than ignoring the problems of another ethnicity? Like, oh well, they have their own culture, they have their own problems, basically. Like, and so a lot of our content kind of focuses on those kinds of issues and disparities in focus.
I remember hearing Jermaine Greer come very close to how can I put it? Accepting female genital mutilation as a cultural thing.
Right, and that is really just I think the poison that has crept into the left circles is this cultural relativism that is just obscene on a secular ethical level. That is.
I would agree with you 100%.
Yes, and of course, this is not in any way apologizing for problems that conservatives have, or theocracies, or anything like that. It is just that we consider ourselves left-leaning, as you say, and as such we feel the need to police our own, and we identify as feminists, and as such we feel the need to police our own, and we do. And other issues include like male to female trans rights. Like non-cis acceptance and sex worker rights and safety and just things like that. There's problems in the first world that are very pressing, and certainly in scale not as horrifying as, say, the enslavement of entire towns by ISIS and the throwing of gays off of buildings in Syria, or the cultural acceptance of the rape of children in Afghanistan by Bashabazi. Those things we talk about we actually mention in just about every video, and
Yeah.
so they're very, very important to us. But that is not to say that the Western world does not have problems of its own that need to be tackled by groups like feminism, by liberal groups. So it's yeah.
I would agree 100% with that.
Excellent.
But
We're off to a good start.
Yeah, my problem though is, as we kind of touched on, is some of these groups and some of the focus on trivial things, or yeah, and they tend to be in the media too. They tend to be mainstream. That's also a major problem. If it was just some 14-year-olds on Tumblr, I really wouldn't. I guess I probably wouldn't be an anti-feminist. But the fact that you get a lot of this in the mainstream.
Well, that's interesting. Like you identify as an anti-feminist. Do you identify as an anti-liberal as well?
No, well, look, I don't know how many of my videos you've watched, but I do often promote good feminism and good feminists. I've often talked about Karen DeCrow, for example. I don't know if you know Karen DeCrow.
Oh, we've heard of her, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm more than happy to promote good feminism, and I think there's a place for a good, legit women's rights movement. I just think that the mainstream of feminism has become corrupt. And look, most feminists may not be that way, but the most vocal people are, and that's a problem.
Okay. Well, I mean, I
Do you
guess
see my point?
the same perspective can be made about liberalism at large, or even the men's rights movement at large. But you wouldn't classify yourself as an anti-liberal or an anti-MRA because of those outspoken negative voices, yes?
Well, I think most times when people focus on men's rights activists, they actually use non-MRAs or Paul Elam. That tends to be the typical thing. It's either something Paul Elam wrote or a non-MRA like Roosh V. I'm more than happy for people to criticise myself or other actual MRAs, but when people start criticising us for what other groups have said, and then they say, well, you sound the same. Well, if we sound the same, why not pick on someone who actually identifies as an MRA and point out where they've said the same thing and use that as an example? But of course they don't.
If I could chime in here real quick, just
Yeah.
I have a thought along those lines in that subject matter. It's been my experience that the media takes whatever sensational story they can and just goes with it without really doing the research, and that tends to
I agree
misinform
100%.
people.
I agree 100%. But you can't deny that there are feminist voices in the media who do that.
Well, that's true, yeah, but there are also male voices. I don't know what would be considered MRA voices in the media. I agree that there aren't really any of those.
Maybe
It'd be nice to hear some, like if there are MRAs out there that would like to.
That's about it.
Oh, sorry, what?
Milo, I think that's about it. I don't think we have really much mainstream reach. And look, if we did have the mainstream reach and I saw the same problems, then yeah, maybe I would consider myself an anti-MRA, and maybe I would be advocating for a different group to tackle those problems. Well, but I think the term feminism has become associated with those crazies, if that makes sense.
Well, in the same, well, maybe not in the same way, because as you say, the representation isn't exactly equal, but the MRA doesn't exactly have a sterling reputation either. You know, somebody hears
I agree.
MRA, they think they associate it with anti-feminist. They associate it with woman, conflating feminism and womankind. And I don't think people like Milo do the MRM much credit, being that he focuses just ad nauseum of being an anti-MRA more than men's rights activist. And I understand, you know, there's feminist organizations that have stood in the way, and there's rad fems that have boycotted MRA meetings, but he's really, really anti-feminism.
Yeah, well, I don't know if he does identify as an MRA, but he does actually speak about men's issues. So I'm more than happy to have him as an MRA if he's happy to use the label. And I'm happy to have someone talk about men's issues like suicide and things like that in the mainstream media. I do agree that he does come across as very anti-feminist. I don't know if you saw his recent debate at a university.
No, the last thing of his that we saw was him interviewing on the Rubin Report.
Okay, maybe after this hangout, I'll find a link and send it to you because I'd be interested to see what you think of it.
Okay.
But I would argue that he is against a certain type of feminism like I am. I don't think he would be against feminists fighting to stop, female genital mutilation and things like that. It's that type of extremist.
I think
liberal.
he's an extremist in his own right. His classification of feminism is shrill, fat, and ugly. Like, literally, this is how he describes feminists. He seems to have a thing against lesbians as well. It talks about dykes and man-hating a lot. He also seems to have kind of a problem. He also seems to have kind of a problem with the gay community at large getting the right to get married. This really weird kind of, and I know he's a gay man himself, but he's very. I would not hold him up as a good example. I think of promoting men's rights, being that he comes.
Well, I might have missed that stuff. If that's true, then
I'll link it to you.
Yeah, that's fine. I'd reconsider what I said then if that's true.
Yes, he said all this on the Rubin Report, and Rubin is also.
I haven't seen that. So yeah, you're saying he's more right-leaning? Is that
that was definitely how it struck me? Yeah, he seems to have a kind of social Darwinist streak around him as well, which is I don't know. I guess that's a. Well, oh yeah, and he's anti-atheist as well.
Oh, is he? I didn't know that.
Yes, he is. It's really he's really a character that's more of like a caricature of like several things that should be kind of looked down on, I think, in terms of his views.
That's interesting.
Yes, but if anything, I think that highlights the need for a publicly out MRA who is not vitriolic, not controversial in terms of being reasonable.
Well,
like I said,
I mentioned Paul Elam before, and Paul, I know I'm not going to get the quote right, but I'm sure he said in the past that people ignored the men's rights movement for years until people started to say controversial things, and then people start to take notice. And I have to wonder if maybe new movements do need radicals to stir things up and to get publicity. And once that's established, then more reasonable voices can take over. Just a theory.
So, well, no, I actually think you're quite right. The radicals kind of get attention, and then you can be like, well, that's too much for me. Like I want to take a step back from that, and you can take a step back right into the arms, so to speak, of more rational voices of the movement. But so
maybe things need to come in waves. So. And maybe
I guess again, what it highlights is that there really needs to be a more more moderate MRA, I guess. That is public, like yourself, maybe.
Yeah, well, that's what I tried to promote, and I think I tried to lead by example. And I'd say the honey badgers are that too. I'd say there's many prominent voices in the men's rights movement which are moderates.
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. I wasn't implying that there aren't.
No, I'm just saying
they don't have the. And of course, this is a grievance of the MRA of the MRM, but that there isn't much publicity for them outside of the internet. But let's back up a little bit. Like I outlined some issues that feminism can tackle in just the first world. Why don't you go into what the first world problems of the MRM are?
Well, there's the sentencing gap where men get longer sentences for exactly the same crimes, which I hope you would agree is a human rights violation, that people should be sentenced based on their crime, not on their gender.
Yes.
Male circumcision, which is happening in the first world as well as the third world. And one of the arguments I often hear about female circumcision being bad is the conditions it's done under, but what a lot of people don't realise is that male circumcision in a lot of the places around the world is done under the exact same circumstances. Let's see, what else? Parental rights, male homelessness. Males are the majority of the homelessness, yet in many places females get special services. Male suicide is a major issue. They're the main ones I tend to focus on. There's a couple of others, like the draft, for example. I think that's an issue, but because I'm not an American, I don't think it affects me as much. So maybe American MRAs are more concerned about that. In fact,
there
I
isn't
think
really an enforced draft in the United States. It's a volunteer army.
no, but there is the expectation that you sign up when you sign up to vote.
Right, and I think this is a good point. At
the moment, it's trying to be, someone's trying to overturn it in the court system in America. So it'll be interesting to see whether they open it up to women as well, or whether they scrap it altogether.
Right, and I think that is one of those two things absolutely needs to happen, and we agree with that. All of the things that you listed are issues worthy of a gender movement that tackles those specific things. I think the problem with like if we stick with the draft for a minute, people seem to judge it as like a zero-sum game. Like it's either bad for men or it's good for women or something. And it strikes me that this is one of those things that we can find common ground on in terms of it being maybe not equivalently, but unfair to everyone involved. It segregates the military away from women. You know, you are not smart enough, fast enough, tough enough to do this violent work. And then at the same time it enforces that whole, men, you belong here, you need to, fight and die for your country, and if you don't, then you're a wimp, you're a pussy, you're a woman. So I think, of course, I was in the military myself, but I think it's something that needs to be not just seen as an injustice toward one gender. It strikes me that a lot of the issues that feminists and men's rights activists focus on, while they disproportionately, of course, harm one gender over the other, it tends to have ripple effects that affect the entire population very negatively.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things I often hear as a distraction from the issues I brought up is, well, those things are caused by men anyway, so we shouldn't, for some reason, we shouldn't worry about it. But I would argue that they're caused by society, not by men.
I would agree with that. I think that's what you were describing is the feminist version of like let me phrase this right. Well, like you said, it's dismissing something that's like, well, men cause it, so it's they're the ones who are like reaping what they sow or whatever, and those feminists who do this, I think, are well, first of all, wrong, and second of all, they're doing a disservice to everyone involved, including feminism, because instead of taking this as an opportunity to be like, yes, this is something that needs to be addressed, this is an actual issue, because it does, as I say, ripple out and affect women negatively as well. Instead of using this as an opportunity to ally themselves with men who are concerned with these issues, they use this as like a gotcha, like haha, patriarchy.
It's an interesting thing, because there are feminists who are against the draft, yet the men's rights movement still gets criticism by some feminists for being against the draft, which doesn't make any sense. It's a similar thing with male circumcision. There's many feminists who are against male circumcision, yet when we bring it up as an issue, we're criticised and laughed at by some feminists for doing it. It's quite bizarre. I mean, I guess it's because you have a very diverse movement, but I just find it bizarre that things that we agree on, we often get criticised for.
Yes, I think it's part of that tribalistic impulse that comes with, like, if somebody else says that they also have an issue, then they're trying to, like, undermine what we're doing or something, which is, of course, completely bogus.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I think it's good to do talks like this.
Yes, very much so. Did you have something you wanted to say, Ivy?
Yeah, well, and then that's when you need to take people as individuals. You can't judge the whole movement by one or two, whether it's a good judgment or a bad judgment. You just have to take the people as they are.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and criticise the individual.
Indeed, absolutely. Instead of taking, well, I don't know, instead of like arguing with a person and addressing them as if they're representative of an entire movement, they need to be criticized, as you guys said, or as you both said, as individuals. Yeah, that is a major thing that I think people really need to keep in mind when they're making criticisms of people associated with movements. Really judge them by the fruits of their labors, so to speak. And of course, I don't know, maybe this is hypocritical, although I don't really think so. I don't hold religious people to the same standard, because they, like, feminism, for example, feminism, or the MRM, it's at its core about gender equality and making things, correcting injustices in society. That's the basics of what it means to be as part of a gender egalitarian movement, like feminism or the MRM. Whereas, let's say, a Christian, they have very specific doctrines that say what it means to be a Christian. It's not just believing in Jesus. You know, you have to believe in everything in the Old Testament, so a lot of the Jewish laws. And then you also have to believe in the vicarious redemption and hell and all these other things. So you can't just say.
I would agree with that, but with some exceptions. Don't all feminists hold some beliefs in common, like patriarchy theory, for example? I can name a couple who don't, but they're exceptions to the rule.
Well, and I think that is more like a thing that has to do with the times, in terms of vernacular, in terms of a kind of general consensus, but it doesn't necessarily have to do with the actual definition of what feminism is, as opposed to religion, which is like, this is what you need to believe, commandment 1, 2, 3, 4, So it really frustrates me when people compare movements like feminism to religion. Of course, there are people that can be dogmatic. Of course, there are people that can be dogmatic in any movement.
That's why there is that comparison, though.
Mm-hmm.
It is that if you don't believe in this, then you aren't a good person.
But it's just as fallacious as saying that, like, feminists are like the Nazis because some of them want to censor things. The Nazis killed millions of people. Religions kill millions of people. So I take major exception to these extreme comparisons.
But what was it Aaron Ra said? Something about you're either a feminist or a bigot or something like that. I know I haven't got his quote
Right.
perfectly
Well,
right,
and again, that is something that should be judged on an individual basis. This isn't like doctrinal to feminism that you're either a feminist or a bigot.
no, but when enough people say things like that, you can understand why some people might take exception to it and criticize the movement as a whole.
I suppose.
There- Now, I don't think all feminists believe that. I don't think all feminists fall into that category. I think most feminists are silent, so we don't know what they're thinking or feeling. But out of the more vocal ones, there is definitely a large percentage which have attitudes like that.
Hmm. Well, I mean, there are, of course, criticisms that can be made against any movement.
I agree, and the larger and more diverse the movement gets, and more influence they have, the more likely they are to fall into those traps. I don't think comparing feminism to religion is something that's unique to feminism. I think the reasons why are also can apply to any large movement. I think people become invested in the identity and they're willing to defend that at any cost.
Yes.
Where the dogma comes into it.
Well, and then I personally think that when you have a movement that's big enough and you start generalizing you're either this or that and start telling people what they are, that's when you get into a lot of trouble, because people then have to identify, no, I'm not this, and so you get people like anti-feminists, and because everybody's assuming that you're a feminist. And that was one of the things that I had run into, that I actually can understand the point of view from the MRM, saying that everybody is a feminist, but they're actually not. It's just you have people that are saying you're either a feminist or you're not, if that makes sense.
So would you prefer the term non-feminist to anti-feminist?
Absolutely. Anti-feminist seems to, it seems like a proactive thing that you are against everything that feminism stands for.
I can explain why I use the term anti-feminist. Once again, this isn't every feminist everywhere, but it does seem fairly common in the most vocal voices, the mainstream voices, that men are bad and women are good. It basically comes down to that masculinity, there's something wrong with masculinity, and women tend to always be the victims of it, which I think takes away autonomy from women and responsibility in a lot of ways.
Yeah, what you're talking about doesn't necessarily paint women as good, it paints women as victims, which I agree is to use our language, problematic.
Yeah, I think it's misogynistic in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, but I think we've drifted from the topic a little bit. Like we've been finding things that we agree on, certainly, but in terms of being proactive for moving forward gender egalitarianism, what other things do you think we can agree on, we can come together on, aside from like religion and the draft?
Well, I think circumcision. I think all circumcision should be banned.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy in England at the moment. They're talking about banning adult women from getting genital piercings or labiaplasty because that's technically a form of genital mutilation. Yet there's no talk of banning infant male circumcision. So I find that crazy that they're willing to take away adult women's autonomy because it's obviously circumcision or female genital mutilation.
They're adults.
Yet there's not the same consideration for infant boys. So I think that empathy gap is a major issue, and that's one of the main reasons I identify as a men's rights activist, because of issues like that. There's a disconnect with male issues.
And I agree, of course. I think I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Continue with your thought.
No, go on.
The circumcision thing comes primarily from religion, does it not?
Yeah, no, I agree.
This
It was
circles
only
back to religion.
Yeah,
yeah, it was only
but then you have people saying that it's a preventative measure in the medical field for infections, and that's the biggest thing that I hear against, you know.
yeah. Well, circumcision is a cure that's always been in search of a disease, and at one point, um, I think it was about 100 years or so ago, it was meant to stop blacks from raping white women as one of the supposed cures. Um, it's meant to stop epilepsy, all kinds of things. If you look at the history, if you look at the history of circumcision in the West in the last I don't know 150 years, it's been supposed to have been a cure for just about everything. It's amazing. I can send you a list of some of the things you'll be amazed. And of course, the AIDS studies are the latest thing,
Hmm.
which was done in Africa. And yes, there were some studies which suggest that there is a slight reduction, but there's been other studies done in other African countries which show the exact opposite. And of course, using a condom is the best solution of all, and it
Yes.
doesn't require cutting a piece off someone's body.
Right, and it's the whole reason I think that it was being pushed as an alternative to condoms in terms of preventing the spread of HIV was because the Pope was so anti, or maybe still is so anti-condom use in, HIV-stricken parts of Africa. Of course, as you say, the medical results are in dispute.
Well, I think most of the world's health organizations are against it and claim that there is no known medical benefit for it. The one exception tends to be America, where
Hmm.
I think doctors make $400 for 5 minutes of work.
Capitalism.
Yeah, something like that. So
Yes, well, not to get too personal, but let's see, um, this was post USSR. It was just after the collapse, but I'm fairly certain everyone involved had nothing religious at all in mind. I know my parents were atheists, and the doctor probably was as well. It was a family friend, but I got a infection. And they're like, well, we can give you some drugs, or we can do circumcision, and then it won't be a problem ever again. And so even in that non-religious sense, it was something that was promoted, even in even in like fairly post USSR. So that
and
is
here's the thing:
something.
if someone turns 18 and they want to get circumcised because they think it helps to prevent AIDS or whatever,
Hmm.
fine, I've got no problem with that.
Right.
I just don't want it done to newborns against their will.
No, I was 12, but
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
Yeah, that's. I mean, they explained it to me, and I like back then I thought I understood because I didn't
Mm,
have any other opinions to work from.
yeah.
Now it is something that I regret. So yes,
Well, and that's when I think that this issue is more of a parenting issue because it's the parents' decision whether or not they have their child circumcised. So misinformation and proper education are the way to go in that sense.
and I see children as not as like the property of their parents. So that could take us into a whole larger debate about like what parents can and can't do to their children.
Yeah, you wouldn't give a parent permission to tattoo their child, for example,
Mhm.
or to put a cigarette out on their arm.
Right.
Yeah, because I often hear, well, they don't remember it. Well, they wouldn't remember it if a parent put a cigarette out on their arm either, but you would still take the child away from the parent because it's abusive.
Agreed.
Uh,
100% agreed. Yeah.
and you wouldn't say it's a parenting right if the parents were Muslim and wanted to get their daughter circumcised.
Well, actually,
Well, I
some
wouldn't.
would.
I wouldn't.
Right? No, I
Yeah.
wouldn't either, of course. But that is another thing altogether in terms of the, I don't know. I guess
I think a
Western
child.
indifference.
Yeah, well, I think a child's human rights supersedes parental rights.
Yes, and I think this is where we can really agree in terms of what motivates us as advocates or activists, depending on how active we are and outside of the online community. But it is just the belief, for lack of a better word, in secular ethics and universal human rights. Yes?
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yes. Yeah, and in terms of like Western indifference, that cultural relativism of, for instance, Muslims living in the West, kind of being segregated from society, being allowed to live by their own rules, to the detriment of children, I think kind of goes hand in hand with the whole Western centrism of wanting to blame the West for all the problems in the Middle East as well.
Yeah, no, look, I would agree. I've got no problem with someone having their own culture in the West, just
Yeah,
so long as that culture doesn't violate any laws or human rights.
agreed. Yes.
It's a bit boring when we agree on everything.
I know. It's people are going to be so disappointed. Well, apparently, someone in the chat wants I think you to talk about Tommy Sotomayor. Do you have an opinion on that?
I know him, but I don't know a lot about him. Is there anything in particular? Probably
Yes,
Dean Esme.
but
I
Bowman
think
has.
Dean Esme is probably a better person to ask. I think Dean knows Tommy quite well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. We won't touch on it. Bowman
I've
was
never spoken to Tommy, so I
okay.
don't know him that well.
Okay, and you haven't like had him on your channel or anything, so okay.
No. I've never chatted to him.
Okay, yeah.
Is there anything in particular? I mean, maybe.
Yeah. Bowman, the poster who keeps asking this question, he asked us
Bowman,
to bring it up, and
keeps asking me to debate Kevin Logan. It's like a constant thing.
yes, he's very.
Follows us around saying, "When are you going to debate Kevin Logan?" I'm happy to have a chat with Kevin Logan. I think having a chat's probably more productive than a debate.
Yes, I agree. You know, like it's not a debate format means there's a loser and there's a winner, which is fine, I think, in like a college setting where you have like a large audience. But this is, I know we have like the internet as our audience, but here it's more. It feels more like a personal one-on-one chat almost than a.
I think the problem with debates is they tend to, on gender topics anyway, gender issues, they tend to come down to, all right, here's this statistic and it's fact, and then the other side says, no, that's not the right statistic. Here's the statistic, which is fact. And then both sides think their statistics are correct and they argue, but no one really gets a chance to examine either statistic. You know what I mean?
Yes, and I guess for there to be any kind of consensus, there needs to be
an examination
on what a credible source is.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people on both sides are going to disagree over that. So, and it's hard to go through a 200-page report in the middle of a debate.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, like the way that I think of debates, I think of like Christopher Hitchens style debating, where he is courteous, but he still really like scorches the opposition in terms of rhetoric and just his overall vernacular skills, and gets the audience on his side, and that's how he wins a debate or won a debate.
Yeah.
So this is clearly not the same kind of format. So I agree. Well, I think chats are much better for this internet format than a debate.
Yeah,
I think.
Can I?
Sorry. Go on.
It's okay.
Yep.
I think with particularly gender politics, because you have human rights involved. It's not a black and white issue. There's a lot of gray involved. So if you're debating, then there's a certainty in it. But it just chats, you can find a consensus, and everybody needs human rights, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree.
The Tommy Sotomayor thing, as far as I understand it, Bowman's fixation with it is that the Honey Badgers had him on and kind of promoted one of his projects, and he constantly asks for donations, supposedly to further men's rights, and he has yet to deliver on any of them, I think is his main gripe. And it's been like years, and it's been thousands of donations, and so he wants him kind of held accountable, I guess. But I mean, if you've never spoken to him, then
that's the first time I've ever heard of that, so I don't know. But
Right.
if that's true, that is an issue, I guess.
Indeed.
I mean, a lot of people on our side have criticised Anita Sarkeesian for not delivering the videos that she promised. So yeah, if that's true, that is an issue.
I love that Anita Sarkeesian somehow wormed her way into this talk. No, it's a fair comparison. It's a fair comparison. It's just,
Yeah.
it's a funny thing to me. Yes.
Well, she is a major player in the feminist movement. Well, the visible feminist movement. Let me put it that way.
Well, in terms of video games and media, perhaps.
Well, didn't she go to the UN? It's a fairly big thing.
Yeah, she did. Along with Zoe Quinn, to talk about, I believe, internet harassment. Yes.
Yeah. So I would consider that a fairly big player.
Okay.
If you get an audience with the UN, they haven't
Fair
invited
enough.
me.
Fair enough. I guess we just don't pay her that much heed. But yeah, that's a fair point. So I guess we can start wrapping it up. We're at about coming close to an hour now, and you said you can't go much longer than that. So what was there some other issue that you wanted to put forward that we can maybe find some common ground on?
No, I think we're off to a good start. Do you guys want to come on my channel to continue this sometime in the future?
Yeah, we
Maybe
would like
definitely.
or something like that.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll get some non-MRAs and non-feminists on. Maybe some egalitarians or something as well.
Sounds like a plan.
Yep.
Cool.
All
I
right,
think this has been productive, and I've enjoyed it. It's been good. I think we've covered some good common ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and absolutely feel free to share this video on your own channel once it's done processing.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much, Bane. It's really always a pleasure to speak with you. You're a very reasonable quote-unquote opponent.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Thank you, Bane. Have a good night.
You too. Bye.